What happens when a movie star gets behind the wheel of race cars instead of movie scripts? Paul Newman didn't just act, he built a secret car empire that had everyone in the racing world asking questions. He transformed normal cars into legends. Stick around, because I'm about to show you 8 of his craziest cars, and some of these secrets have never been told before. Number 1. 1988 Volvo 740 Wagon. You're looking at something that by all rights should have been a boring family car, but Paul Newman turned it into a surprisingly wild machine most people never talk about. Newman bought a brand new 1988 Volvo 740 Turbo Wagon and then made some choices that would make any gear geek raise an eyebrow. Most people who saw this car back then saw a big boxy wagon good for groceries or road trips, nothing more. But Newman had other ideas. Here's the first twist. The factory engine was a weak 4-cylinder that made about 154 horsepower. Newman didn't want that. He pulled it out and dropped a turbocharged 3.8-liter V6 from a Buick Grand National muscle car. That engine was legendary in the 1980s for being one of the fastest American blocks you could buy, rated officially at 276 horsepower and about 300 pound-foot of torque in stock GNX form. So right away, you've got this weird boxy wagon with way more grunt than it originally left the factory with. And tell me, when was the last time you saw a Volvo wagon with an American muscle engine under the hood? That's exactly why this story grabs attention. But Newman didn't stop there. He ditched the Volvo's automatic transmission and installed a Borg-Warner 5-speed manual from a Pontiac Firebird so he could actually use all that muscle on the road. Think about it. Most people wouldn't even dream of putting a manual gearbox in a practical wagon like this. So when Newman did it, it wasn't gimmicky. It was real performance thinking. Then there's the suspension upgrades. Lowered springs, Bilstein shocks, and bigger sway bars, all installed so the car would actually handle the extra power. But here's the part most people miss. This wasn't some trailer queen garage car only shown at meets. The odometer showed about 76,000 miles when it went to auction, meaning Newman used it. People drove this thing. It wasn't museum art, it was a used performance wagon. And the price it brought at auction tells you how rare this piece of history has become. More than $80,000 US when it was sold in March 2023. That's huge money for a Volvo wagon of any kind. Why would a Hollywood legend and serious racer take something as straightforward as a Volvo wagon and turn it into a muscle-powered sleeper? And that question leads directly into the next car he owned, which had an even stranger mix of luxury and brute force. Number 2. 1995 Volvo 960 Wagon. You might think a station wagon is for kids, groceries, or long road trips, right? But Paul Newman had one that turned every assumption on its head. After his first hot rod Volvo, Newman wanted something even bigger, louder, and faster, and he didn't stop at a V6. In the mid-1990s, he took a 1995 Volvo 960 wagon and made one of the most unusual sleeper cars ever built. This wasn't a toy project or weekend experiment, it was a serious 400-plus horsepower machine that looked normal from the outside. Here's a question. When you hear Volvo Estate, do you think 400 horsepower? Exactly. That's the kind of thinking Newman liked to twist. Under the hood, instead of the original Volvo engine, this wagon got a 5.0-liter Ford V8 with a Ken Bell supercharger stuck on top. That setup pushed power well over 400 horsepower, enough to embarrass a mid-90s Mustang Cobra on straight roads. Newman didn't build this alone. He teamed up with Ross Converse Engineering in Maine to make it happen. They literally had to push back the firewall to make room for the massive block, a choice most tuners wouldn't even attempt. Imagine sliding into what looks like a normal Volvo and then feeling on-tap muscle like that. And most people still don't know. Newman convinced his friend David Letterman to build one too. On The Daily Show in 1995, Letterman told host Jon Stewart about Paul's call inviting him to get a V8 Volvo built. Letterman eventually did, in metallic red, and later showed it off on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. But wait, this wasn't the final twist. Paul's story with Volvo wagons took one more bizarre turn, leading to a car even fewer people have seen. And that's where things get even stranger. Number 3. 1998 Volvo V90. You might think a Volvo station wagon is slow and boring, but Paul Newman's 1998 Volvo V90 threw that whole idea out the window. Here's the fact that grabs you. This car wasn't built in a garage by some kid. It was built by Paul Newman's own race team as a surprise gift for him in 2007, right near the end of his life. At first glance, it looks like a normal Volvo wagon. Most folks driving past in traffic would never guess what's under the hood. But hidden beneath that plain body is a Corvette LS2 V8 engine, the same 6.0-liter V8 that powered a C6 Corvette back in the 2000s. That engine makes around 400 horsepower, which is far more than twice what any stock version of this wagon ever had. What other station wagon from the 1990s could do that? Few people knew this car existed for years. It mostly lived in the shadows of Newman's other performance cars, hidden because Newman liked wagons that looked normal but hit hard. To handle all that power, the original Volvo transmission and engine were pulled out. In went a GM 4-speed automatic, which could cope with a V8's torque better than the original setup could ever manage. Here's another twist most people miss. The team didn't change the exterior at all. Except for a subtle V06 badge on the rear and a few tiny hints like red brake calipers, you would never suspect this wagon hides a muscle car heart. Inside, they even added a small plaque on the glove box that reads, "To PLN. This should get you to the grid on time. From the team." That tells you everything about how this car was meant to be used. Fast and serious. And here's the kicker most car fans don't realize. This wagon was sold at auction years later, and while the price estimate was only $20,000 to $25,000, it ended up selling for over $57,000 because of its rarity and its story. So you've got a Volvo that looks normal on the outside, sounds just like a station wagon when parked, but in motion feels like a Corvette with wheels. That blend of ordinary and unexpected power leads perfectly into the even stranger stories about how Newman got hooked on these secret sleepers. Number 4. 900 plus HP Nissan 280ZX. This car sounds like something built in a dream, but Paul Newman really raced it. It packed over 900 horsepower and it wasn't a stunt car. It was serious track hardware. Most people think of Newman as an actor, but he wasn't playing at speed. He lived it. He jumped into competition through the Sports Car Club of America and then into prototype levels where speed stopped being polite and started being wild. One of the most extreme cars tied to his racing legacy was a 1979 Nissan 280ZX converted into a twin-turbo V8 monster capable of around 933 horsepower. A mind-bending figure for its era and context. What kind of car needs nearly 1,000 horsepower and 2 turbochargers? For most people, that's supercar territory. But this one was based on a 280ZX body, a car originally sold as a friendlier Grand Tourer. Newman's involvement wasn't just symbolic. He raced with the Bob Sharp racing team, driving variations of Nissan Z cars from the 510 to the ZX series. His race career included IMSA GT1 championships and deep endurance events, which demanded machines that could sustain power, speed, and stress over hours of competition. This Nissan wasn't just fast on paper, it was one of only 3 twin-turbo prototype V8 280ZXs built, meaning it was an extremely limited and experimental machine with radical engineering ahead of its time. Newman and his team didn't race this to collect stickers on its windshield. They used it to push boundaries in American sports car racing, blending brute force with chassis balance. And the way this car was built highlights how Newman's focus on performance technology was just as deep as his on-screen intensity. This crazy Nissan prototype wasn't alone. Before this, Newman cut his teeth racing cars like the Triumph TR6, which launched his competitive career, and others. That path led him toward bigger challenges and even stranger machines in his garage and race stable. Would you believe the very next car in his story is a Porsche that nearly dominated endurance classics? Number 5. Porsche 935. This wasn't just another race car. It was one of the most famous endurance machines in motorsport history, and Paul Newman raced it. In the late 1970s, Newman plunged headfirst into serious endurance racing, and one of the cars that defined that era for him was the Porsche 935. This isn't a stock sports car. It's a turbocharged Group 5 race version of the legendary 911, built to dominate circuits like Le Mans, Daytona, and Sebring. How many Hollywood actors can claim they competed at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, one of the toughest races on Earth? In 1979, Newman joined teammates Dick Barber and Rolf Stommelin in a Porsche 935 for Dick Barber Racing. They battled through rain, traffic, and mechanical chaos to finish second overall. An incredible result for a privateer team and a moment few racing fans remember today. Nearly 24 hours of high-speed action, drivers swapping in and out, brutal fatigue setting in, and Newman right in the thick of it. That Porsche wasn't slow either. The 935's twin-turbo flat-six engine could crank out upwards of 800-plus horsepower in race trim, a monster achievement for the time. But there's something most people overlook. The car Paul Newman drove in that Le Mans race, with Hawaiian Tropic livery, wasn't a fresh-off-the-line Porsche. It was a seasoned, battle-tested machine that had been deployed, raced, and evolved over multiple seasons by dedicated endurance teams. That's the kind of engineering maturity usually reserved for factory squads, not private outfits. At the finish, after hours of wheel-to-wheel combat, Newman and his crew climbed onto the podium amidst a roar from the crowd. This wasn't a movie set. This was real racing history etched into one of the toughest motorsport stages in the world. And even today, that same Porsche 935, once driven by Newman at Le Mans, has become one of the most valuable classic racers on the planet, selling for millions at auction years later. Believe it or not, the next car in this story took a completely different path, turning everyday performance into a championship-winning machine. Number 6. Oldsmobile Cutlass. You've heard of muscle cars, but have you pictured Paul Newman in one ripping around a pro race series track? In 1989, Newman stepped into the Trans Am Series, a really tough American road racing championship, behind the wheel of a purpose-built Oldsmobile Cutlass. This wasn't a street car with stickers slapped on it. This was a dedicated racing machine. Campaigned for Newman Sharp, his own team with co-driver and partner Bob Sharp. This Cutlass looked somewhat normal in silhouette, but when that day's cars lined up on grid, fans quickly learned the car under Newman's helmet wasn't stock. The 1989 Cutlass raced with a turbocharged Buick V6, an engine with serious torque for Trans Am tracks, giving Newman the punch he needed against tough competition. What does it feel like when an actor famous for films suddenly lines up against professional drivers in a tough series like Trans Am? For Newman, there wasn't any Hollywood glamour moment here. It was real, full-contact racing against fields stacked with seasoned pros. Newman competed in 5 events that season, and while he didn't claim the championship, he stood toe-to-toe with some of the fastest racers in North America. Then in 1990, he returned with a revised Cutlass, this time packing a Chevy V8 engine under the hood. That's a huge engine for a Trans Am car, and that choice reflected Newman's constant push for performance. A Hollywood star smashing gears and clipping apexes in a purpose-built race car against hardened professionals. That's fury on wheels. And here's the twist most people miss. Newman's racing journey didn't slow after Trans Am. It took him into even more technical and exotic race cars that reshaped his legacy behind the wheel. Number 7. Triumph TR6. This car looks totally unremarkable at first glance, but it was the machine that launched Paul Newman's entire racing life. You've probably heard of Newman as a movie star, but few people know that in 1976, at age 50, he actually won a major national racing title driving a sports car most people now ignore. He entered the Sports Car Club of America (SCCA) racing series behind the wheel of a Triumph TR6 and clinched the D-Production National Championship, his first ever big racing win. Let me ask you something. What do you imagine when someone says racing champion? You probably picture Italian exotics or German speed machines. But Newman beat them all in a humble 1971 Triumph TR6, a British two-door roadster with a 6-cylinder engine and surprisingly sharp handling. Here's the part that will make you sit up. This wasn't a car gifted to him by a manufacturer or pro team. Newman bought this TR6 himself from legendary American racer Bob Tullius's Group 44 team, and then he drove it with his own hands in competition. Before this moment, Newman had been enjoying cars and competing in smaller events, but this championship really changed the game. He'd started racing just a few years earlier, first in a Datsun 510 and then a Lotus Elan. But the TR6 was where he proved he wasn't just a celebrity on track, he was a serious racer. And the funny thing? Most people today have never seen a photo of that Triumph, even though it's the first car that made Newman a real motorsport competitor. From this humble British roadster, he went on to more powerful machines, and that chain of events led directly into the next car he raced, a surprising second machine that helped him dominate more races than anyone expected. Number 8. Datsun 510. You might assume Paul Newman jumped straight into big, powerful race cars, but the very next step after that Triumph TR6 was a humble Datsun 510 race car that taught him how to really drive. Before hitting the national stage, Newman joined forces with legendary racer Bob Sharp, a man who helped make Datsun Nissan a serious competitor in American road racing. Newman didn't show up with fame and demands. He showed up ready to learn, wearing jeans and asking everyday racing questions like everyone else. Sharp handed him the keys to a Datsun 510B sedan built for the Sports Car Club of America, SCCA, and that car became Newman's real baptism into competitive driving. Think about a Datsun 510 for a moment. It's lightweight, balanced, and far from glamorous. But in the early 1970s, it was one of the most competitive cars in SCCA B sedan classes. Newman quickly learned wheel-to-wheel racing in this package. He even chose to race as P.L. Newman, so his acting career didn't overshadow his performance on track. Here's a detail most people miss. Newman wasn't out there just showing up. In 1973, he pushed that 510 hard enough to reach 5 SCCA podiums in a tough competitive season, including at least one race win, while proving he could handle pressure on track just like any other serious driver. When most actors get behind a wheel today, are they trying to learn to compete or just posing for photos? Newman didn't want the spotlight. He wanted real speed. And that's why the Datsun 510 mattered so much in his story. It wasn't awesome because it was famous. It was awesome because it made him good. That foundation on a modest little car set him up for something bigger, a car that helped him win his first national championship. And that jump is what changes everything you thought you knew about his racing path. If you are enjoying this wild ride through Paul Newman's garage, give us some hype for this video right now. Smash that subscribe button and drop a like to make sure this series gets to every car lover out there. The next twist in this story is coming up, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.